From our studios in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. I am joined, as always, by my glorious co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. We are here. We are both alive, and we hope that our listeners are also alive and surviving the Halloween season. I know this is busy. This is the busy season for everybody in our collective industry.
Yeah, they either just opened, or in the last sprint to try to get things.
And
open.
Then next week they will be working on Christmas.
If they aren't already. Yeah. Yeah, the majority of what I'm working on now, I've actually got clients who now have me design Halloween so that it can change over to Christmas quickly. So we work on them both simultaneously. I don't even call it Halloween season and Christmas season anymore. It's now the fourth quarter holidays.
The holidays. We just call them the holidays. We mush them all together.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Well, on that note, Halloween Horror Nights has opened in Hollywood, and I was there as invited media for the opening night, for media night. And I don't want to, go too much into it. I mean, we have videos, blah, blah. If you are curious about what it looks like, you can certainly find videos. There's plenty of videos. I just wanted to highlight 3 things I think that are most interesting at least for our audience. And the first is that the mazes are very different. Even the IP mazes are very different. And that was not the case in the past. They've been more, it's more like they've followed the same show beats, in the past. And it's not like the beats are entirely different, but the scenes are different. And I think I was pleasantly surprised to see that they were different in them, especially ones like The Last of Us, where it's still based on the game and it's still Ellie and Joel who are going through the Pittsburgh area. But in Orlando, they focus more on the 2-story sets, right? Because they have the space. They focus more on let's bring to life some of these big scenes. They have the car crashing in to the subway area. They have this big things. But in Hollywood, it starts off where they have Joel and Ellie outside, and Ellie is just telling terribly corny mushroom jokes to Joel as you are entering, and they're the actors are just telling terrible jokes because that's part of the game, is her making jokes and just relieving the tension type of thing. And then it's more where you can see the story. Like, you hear the jokes, then you walk in and they find a dead body, and they're like, this person wasn't infected. And they're like, it must be hunters. And then you see the hunters. So it's really more, I'd say more actors, more story, which seems more Hollywood versus, Orlando that has the sets. And it just got me thinking that it seems like just from my one night visit and looking at these two, that the parks are leaning a little bit more into their assets. Like, we've always talked about that, how people in our industry know, but the public doesn't really realize that the setup in Orlando gives you the ability to make 2-story sets because you can build all year, but you have the talent pool in Hollywood, especially right now with the actor strike, and especially because the actors can't promote anything that is from a studio, which is why they're always mentioning the video game, and it's not based on the HBO movie. It's based on the video game. So I think they kind of seemed to me to lean into that, where there seemed to be more acting scenes in a lot of the areas. In Chucky, there's dolls that are coming out, and there's scenes, like the vignettes of the movies are happening inside these versus the really more reliance on sets and on just effects that you can build, bigger effects and bigger sets in Orlando. So that was one of my main big takeaway.
Well, and that actually kind of makes sense, even in terms of the trends of what's happening in the parks themselves. I mean, we are on this coast having a significant trouble casting period, because the actor strike, has not affected the rest of the country the way it's affected California. It perhaps New York, but here in Orlando, it hasn't affected it at all, and we still have a limited talent pool, and we still have an ever-growing amount of seasonal events that need to be cast. So, relying on, and the fact that a giant soundstage, you say you can build year-round, which is not 100% accurate in Orlando, because those sound stages do get rented out, and the parks do actually have to pay the studio for the use of that space. So whenever they start using it, they start paying for it. Granted, it's coming out of one pocket going into another, but it still has to come out of the budget for the event. The fact that that cost in Orlando for a giant soundstage is significantly cheaper than the cost for a similar soundstage in California, I think that's the real factor. It's the fact that, as you say, it's their assets and it's what they can utilize, it's what they can pay for, and what they can find. It's much easier, obviously, in California right now to find actors, and it's much easier in Orlando to find space to do, over the top big stuff. But I'll go back even to, when I the last time I visited, which was over 20 years ago, the last time I visited Horror Nights in Hollywood and in Florida, and it was significant. It's always been more theatrical, less cinematic, remarkably so, but more theatrical in California and more cinematic or grand scale in Florida, simply because of the size of the spaces. It's and to be completely honest, back in the day, I significantly enjoyed Hollywood more than I did Orlando, simply because that's my personal preference. I like the more intimate, stronger storytelling than the big giant effects. Big giant effects are, once you've seen one or two of them, it's great and you're done. And secondly, they all have to reset. So there's always the pulse and the weight of, oh, something cool's about to happen. Something cool's about to happen. Something cool's about to happen. Meanwhile, you're getting the operations people trying to push you through the maze because they've overbooked the night. So they're trying to get everybody through. So that's why I have a tendency, and again, I also come from an acting background, so I have a tendency to like the reliance on actors more than the reliance on giant special effects. But you're absolutely right. They're finally leaning into what they have available to them. And I think what's driven that is budget.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's like restrictions are the necessity of creativity or something. It's like something
like that. Yeah.
You put a box around somebody and suddenly it's way more creative than if they could do whatever they want. But it just I do think it's just very interesting how they've not even the same scenes really, which is a departure from before, where they just tried to take the same each story beat. Like they took the same beats, the exact same beats, and they tried to put them on both ends, and they're just very different. Even they're very different. The Joel and Ellie example, in Orlando, they made a big deal about how there's one scene in that game where Ellie, it's the first time she takes a gun and protects Joel, and that is in the Orlando area, because you can have the two-story thing, and she's there she has a big shotgun, and they made a big deal about how she always has a shotgun behind a curtain, right? You see the actor doing this behind the curtain because they don't want it to be inside of the guests. They don't want her to point at the guests, all that kind of stuff. After what happened in 2016, they made a point of talking about that. That scene's not in Hollywood at all. They're using a different scene entirely to convey the same sentiment, but it's a scene that's more intimate. It's them being in, I think it's like a locker room, or it's a smaller, a smaller space, smaller scene. So they've chosen scenes based on the size of the scene, even to convey, same thing with Stranger Things. In the Orlando version, you have the scene where Eddie, they're fighting the bats, and the bats are all circling around. There's projections, and it's this huge scene. I mean, there's bats projected all over 20 feet in the air, and they're all attacking, and everything is crazy you're walking through. But in Hollywood, it's that simple scene between the two actors where she has the lantern and she's like, "No, go away. I don't want to be around you right now." And it's just that intimate scene between two characters. So I was pleasantly surprised in essence of just.
That's great. Yeah. It's clear that this has become either a cyclical or the pendulum swinging back and forth, because again, 20 years ago, the two parks, in fact, they didn't even have the same IPs. The two Halloween Horror Nights didn't even have the same IPs back in the day. Then they swung, so they tried to find an economy of scale so that they could do, basically design once, install twice, or install two different locations. And now they're swinging back to
Yep.
the other direction. It
Everything's
sounds
a
like.
pendulum, right? In this industry.
Everything is a pendulum. Yep. To everything there is a season.
And the only
Yep.
other
Even the Halloween.
the only other thing I wanted to mention about that event is just that very late in the game, I think last week, they announced that there's 2 activations coming from Blumhouse. I'm not sure why they waited that late. I am assuming it has something to do with IP approval that didn't get approved until way later than it should have. But basically, they have a new water show that is held in the Waterworld Arena, and it's all themed on the Purge, and it's a 15-minute show, and it's just one of the senators comes in and they're using that area as a safe zone. They're like, oh, we found this great safe place for you. It's in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of water, and nobody can get to us, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, the Purgers like drop in from a plane and end up killing everybody. So the Purge wins. So spoilers, the Purge wins. But it's
Shouldn't you say spoiler alert before you say the Purge
that's
wins?
not how this works.
Shouldn't you? Okay.
But it's I was happy. It's just interesting. They've added live entertainment. We just talked about live entertainment coming and going and ebbing and flowing, and Disney investing less in it. But here's Hollywood that is adding, and it's a big crowd suck. We talked about crowd sucks too. It's a big crowd suck. They're doing 4 showings of this a night, and it's a big theater. I think it's a 2,000 seat theater. It's close to a 2,000 seat theater. So it's the Waterworld space fits a lot of people. So it's a good crowd suck to have back in there to be used for horror nights. And there's a lot of complicated effects, so it wasn't just dialed in. I mean, there's a man sets on fire, like to have someone set on fire 4 times a night and fall into it's a lot. I mean, those actors are doing a lot. There's a lot of blood. Yeah.
Were there were there effects that were used exclusively in exclusively in the third show that were not used in the daytime show?
Everything is the same effects. There's gunshots, there's people set on fire, there's just not that big plane that, launches, and that's not in the Purge one. But so it is the same effects. So they're probably the same pool of actors that are trained in all that safety, because I put up a video and I've been hearing from people nonstop about how unsafe it is. And I'm like, well, they're professionals. This is what they do. They've been doing it for 20 years. We're not like, but anyway, and the only other piece that Blumhouse added a behind the screens, which is supposed to be like a BTS tour. It's in the old Shrek 4D theater. And what happens is you walk in and you see props from some of the movies. So you see the Five Nights at Freddy's dolls, which everyone is going bonkers about, and while you're waiting, and then you get led into the 4D theater, and the 4D theater starts off as a presentation, then gets interrupted by Megan, and she comes out and kills the presenter, and then she dances, and then you leave. So it's weird because you spend more time queuing in the pre-show room than the actual show, which is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and then you leave. But again, it's a crowd suck, and that you desperately need crowd sucks in Hollywood. You desperately need them because the layout of the park is so strange and really not built for this many people to be there at once.
Right. The park was never laid out as a park. I mean, you just have to kind of take that into consideration. Whether I go to Universal Studios California during the day or at night, it's a weird layout for a theme park, because again, I'm used to theme parks that were built as theme parks. So
that's about it that I think I have. People can watch the videos and everything later, but from a industry standpoint, those are my biggest takeaways. And also this weekend, of course, our next story is D23 Expo happened. It was a thing. We did not really make notes we didn't plan on discussing D23 Expo, and the reason is because so much of it is just talk, right? It's like, to me, I like scan through the news and I'm like, does this have a date attached to it? If it doesn't, I kind of just ignore it, because you know it's going to change or not happen at all, or so much of it just doesn't materialize or changes or whatever. And I'm not sure, Scott, your take, but I do kind of feel like more and more Disney has been, and I think to an extent Universal as well. I think they've been like putting ideas out to just see what people talk
Oh, I
about.
think they're not doing. Yeah, they're finding a way, and this kind of ties into something that we've talked about with selling tickets to media night. Basically, they've found a way to get focus groups that generate revenue. They're big enough. They're big enough companies. They have enough diehard followers. What I used to call sneezers, those people who will spread the virus of their brand. So what they've done and what they've continue to do it at D23 is the Expo is that they'll float all these ideas out there and they'll see which ones are exciting and which ones get the most chat, which ones get the most have the most traction, and those are the ones that seem to get moved forward or further developed, or sometimes they look at it and go, okay, well, we thought that was a great idea, but it really nobody likes it. What I thought was interesting is there were only two things in there that really had a date. They gave some vague areas of years, but the date was today. Figment started at the time of recording this. Figment started appearing at Epcot, and I saw people on social media today already who said, I haven't done a rope drop at Epcot in years, but my kids so want to meet Figment. So I was like, okay, well, that worked. And then of course the new Moana Journey of Water or Journey into Water, that is of course opening, and that's that opens I think next weekend if I'm not mistaken. They've already done media previews and friends and family experiences, but basically with a lot of the stuff. And the reason we're not going a whole lot into detail is because they've floated it out there. But I got to tell you, this is becoming more, because things are getting more and more expensive to fully produce and to fully flesh out. Even my clients are hiring me up front to come up with some one-sheet ideas for pretty much anything. Everything from, new shows for Space Center Houston to new theme park shows. And so the idea of putting these ideas out there, these top line concepts out there, and seeing what generates is a smart way. It's kind of replacing the focus group, and it's a focus group that generates revenue, which is fascinating to me. I think that's really smart. And we've seen Disney do it a couple of times now, and as you say, Universal is starting to do it more and more. But it's something that you may want to find with even with smaller organizations or smaller attractions. Just throw some ideas out there, because not only does it help you because you get feedback, but it also makes those people who participate have a sense of ownership. And anytime you can create mastery and control in your audience, they become more loyal to your brand and will come and see stuff when it comes to fruition. It used to be the exact opposite. It was like, oh, we have to hold everything close to our chest until we're fully baked, and then we can show it. But I think that, again, pendulum has swung the other way now, that people want to feel as though they are a part of it. It's the mentality of a social media person. It's like all social media wants to feel as though they are entitled and need to participate in the development of everything. And by doing this, they are allowing that to happen and using it to the company's advantage. So I think that's very wise, and taking advantage of the assets that are there. I mean, when you've got, I will call them rabid Disney fans, the D23 folk, when you've got folks who, and lots of them, who are just chomping at the bit for any tiny piece of information. And the moment you share even the most unbaked idea, they will start filling in the details. They will start saying, yes, we love this. No, we hate this. And you've got all the feedback you really need from your most loyal fans.
Yep.
Super smart.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned about doing it on a small scale, because I think there's a way for attractions of any size to do this. And I mean, first of all, as we talked about in the first step, of course, as we talked about in our seminar, last one we did about brainstorming, should always be to get as many ideas out there as you can from your team. It shouldn't be to just stop at the first 10. It's like 100 ideas for, what we could do. And, of course, they're only going to, of course, when you're paying for something like we're paying for Scott for a one sheet, obviously you don't want to pay for 100 one sheets. But, if it's something that you're doing with your internal team, you can sit down and come up with 100 ideas. And then you can get Scott to help flesh some of them out, right? You'd want that idea step first. And then, what I usually tell the, even my smaller clients is I tell them you can even go on Instagram, and even if you put, your top 4 ideas from, you take your 100, you nail them down to 4 with your team, and then you take that and you put those 4 out in Instagram polls or Twitter polls or, anything, you just put them out to the people that are watching. They will help guide it. And then you can get hire out your creative director to help with, the 2 that won in the polls.
Well, and what's interesting for me is, you say that that I can't necessarily be involved in the brainstorming, but actually I've had clients that will hire me instead of to come up with ideas on my own or to do one sheets for some of the stupid top line things that they chatted at around a table somewhere. They've hired me to facilitate a brainstorming session. Yeah. And if they hire me to facilitate the brainstorming session, then I can take all the raw data. And the way I do a brainstorming session is we get a top 5 or a top 3 or whatever number they want based on those attending. And again, as we've talked about, the power of a good brainstorming session is to make certain that you have people from all levels, from all areas. And if you can do it, even throw in people who are not employees, so that, who are fans, so that you get the broadest spectrum of suggestions, and don't go through and edit them until you're done. And so I do that. I've done that for several clients, actually. And we've come up with some really fun stuff that I probably would not have thought of on my own. But then what they do is they then hire me to say, okay, these are the ones that we all liked, and you're already familiar with what was said. Gives me a great jumping off point to go in and further develop these ideas that came out of the brainstorming sessions.
Yeah. Well, okay. We kind of our version of commentary on D23.
Speaking of crazy ideas, speaking of wonderful crazy ideas.
So the next story here is basically that Halloween Horror Nights has set up a seasonal store inside of the Orlando International Airport, and I think it's the same space that they already had leased for the Universal store, but they just transformed it. So it reminds me of what they do with the Tribute store, the smaller Tribute store over on the Islands of Adventure, where it's not a huge experience, but there's theming. It is dark in there. There's different color schemes. There's props and sets, mini sets and whatnot. So it's really a themed retail experience that is a temporary installation for Halloween Horror Nights. And I think that stuff like that is a great idea. It extends the brand, it gives you brand awareness and whatnot. I think it's more about reminding people that Horror Nights is a thing than it really is about. I think it's like an advertisement, I think.
So basically you're saying they turned the Universal Studios store into a Spirit Halloween. No.
Yeah, basically. Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, there are other parks. I mean, SeaWorld has a store there as well. Disney has a store in the airport as well. But I think this is especially unique in the fact that they were able to transform it, or chose to transform it, into something that is seasonally based versus, because I don't believe, and I'm not certain, but I don't believe that the SeaWorld has transformed their store into Howl-O-Scream. They may have some elements there, but it sounds like this is truly taking retailtainment and expanding the experience, which again, Universal is doing in a lot of different areas. They're doing it in Vegas, at Area 15. They're doing it with the family friendly park. They're trying all these different ways to show the different facets of the brand. And not just in a theme park realm. They're doing it from a shop standpoint, or from a smaller version standpoint, from a bar and restaurant standpoint, which I think is all great ways to, again, get someone to pay you to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. To underline that, just to clarify too, there are because I was just there at the airport. I've been there, back and forth, and looked at the stores. Disney has a store there. Of course, all the parks, Disney, SeaWorld have stores there. Mm-hmm. Disney has a Halloween display with their Halloween merch, and SeaWorld has some Howl-O-Scream merch there. But we're not talking about, you should go look at the pictures online if you're curious about this, because it's not a display. Just to be clear, we're not talking about they just brought in their Halloween merch and made a display. This is really a full themed experience where, in a regular store, there's white walls, and it's still a store, and then there's a Halloween, area. This is this is the walls have been painted, and they brought in lights to add, Halloween colors and everything, and there's extended props along the walls. I mean, it's really more of a themed experience. So that's really what we're mean. And obviously it's seasonal, right? Because you're going to have to change it back to like white walls for Christmas. So yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And on that, well, in that same line of thinking, the Great Wolf Lodge, so select Great Wolf Lodge locations around the country are debuting pumpkin spice sweets. This is an older story. We haven't had time to talk about it until this week, but so they're already running at this point in time that now we're talking about them now. But basically, the shtick is they partnered with a designer, and they have decorated the rooms to be fall and autumn, vibe, basically a fall autumn vibe type thing going on. And the room includes like bottomless pumpkin spice lattes and pumpkin spice cinnamon rolls that are delivered in the morning. And they start at $400 and go up depending on the property and where it is in the weekend and whatnot. And I think there's 2 suites at each property or something like that. But yeah, it's just an interesting story, just because I think people like Great Wolf Lodge and the Gaylord Palms, it's a great thing for them, again, to test and try, because I could see this expanding for Christmas. Like I could see you having a ice themed room at the Gaylord for their Christmas properties. I could see you doing a summer beach thing. I just think, the Disney properties, again, this is a model we've seen other places do. They do Disney character theming, they do whatever. But I really like this concept of, they don't have an IP, but the season can be the IP. So let's just make a themed season room and have it be. I think there could be a lot behind this. I think you could adjust this and kind of do it all year round and have it be something that's just fun and helps, even get media out there, things like that.
The thing I really like about it is, unlike a Disney resort or a Universal resort, that the rooms are themed, beautifully themed. Legoland, the Legoland hotels are beautifully, beautifully themed. But this is beautifully themed in a way that is true to a specific season. So it's something that there's a fuse on it. So you've got to, if you want to experience the pumpkin spice sweets, you have to go at this time. And there's a limited number of them, so you have to plan ahead. And it's, you say that there's no IP, but I'll tell you, pumpkin spice, whether you like it or not, is something that everybody knows and certainly equates to this season. It also seems very closely adjacent to the Great Wolf Lodge overall brand, which is sort of that homey feel, that comfortable feel, and certainly that family feel. And so it when we first started talking about this story prior to recording, the first thing that came to my mind was I could smell what the room smelled like, which made me feel warm and cozy and comfortable. So yeah, I agree with you, and I think that we can go from pumpkin spice to gingerbread spice to I don't know, sporty spice. No, you can go to whatever other decor you want to do. And I also like the fact that it's tied to a specific designer, because there is a certain humanity about that is really quite nice. And the fact that they chose to lead with the fact that, because they could have just said, they could have led with Great Wolf Lodge is doing these specially designed suites for the holidays, but they actually led in their marketing with the fact that this is done by a specific designer who is known for this kind of thing. And when you see the photos, you look at it and you go, wow, that really is thought out and well done and well decored. And it's the kind of thing that you'd kind of go, boy, I wish I could hire them to do the decor for my home, because it really made it feel homey and comfortable, and yet very much in line and on brand with the fall holiday season. So
and I'm sure something like that might be out of reach for a smaller brand, just because they have so many, when you add all the properties together, you're actually talking about a lot of rooms that one design could be copied in a lot of rooms. But I think you could look for local designers and local people. And, again, you could make it more local. And the only other data point that I got was from this last Transworld when I interviewed Little Spider Creations, who does fabrication for theme parks, and they said that increasingly their clients are coming from Airbnb and hotels that want to make their experiences more themed, even in Airbnbs, to make them so basically they're becoming home decorators instead of theme park producers.
I love that.
And I think it's accessible, I think, to smaller parks. You just adjust it a little bit and make it more local.
And I was going to go take even half a step further and to say, even if you don't have your own hotel, if you have partner hotels, see if they would be interested in doing a specific series of rooms that are themed to whatever your holiday event is. If you have a holiday event, if you have a seasonal event that is bringing people in from out of town, see if one of your partner hotels, because every theme park that I know has some sort of partner hotel, see if your partner hotels would let you come in and provide enough decor to create a special experience so that the guests don't just experience your seasonal event while they're there. They arrive and they're at their seasonal event, and they enjoy that seasonal event right up to the moment that they check out. That's something that Disney has been doing for years, and this is an opportunity to test that with partnership hotels, even for smaller properties. All right. Well, speaking of, I don't even know what I was speaking of. We're out of time. I was going to try to make a really good, smooth transition, and I couldn't do it. So we're out of time, and we're really glad once again that you spend the time listening to us. I know I talk to so many people who will say, "Gosh, I can't wait until next week." In fact, I have people that I actually work with on certain projects who are regular listeners, and I started talking about what we were talking about on the show, and they said, "Wait, I haven't listened to it yet. I don't want to know." So we really appreciate you, and we hope that you continue to share whatever you get from our show with everybody in the industry. So hopefully they can join us as well. On behalf of Philip Hernandez with Haunted Attraction Network and Gantom Lighting, and myself, Scott Swenson with Scott Swenson Creative Development, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we will see you next week.